To the world, he was my protective brother. To me, he was my whole universe. But when I discovered the truth he hid, my world fell apart. But then, I became the storm that ripped his world to shreds. To the world, he was my protective brother. To me, he was my whole universe. When people spoke of strength, they spoke of Arav. Tall, confident, with a gaze that silenced chaos, he was the kind of brother girls in movies prayed for. And I didn't have to pray. I was born with him. Our parents died in a car crash when I was 6. I don't remember much of that night, except the sound of glass shattering and Arav's arm shielding me. He was only 15. But in that moment, he became everything: mother, father, protector, home. He never let me cry alone. When I woke up screaming from nightmares, he would stay up, holding my hand until the sun peeked through the curtains. He gave up college scholarships to stay close to me. He worked late nights, skipped meals, sacrificed sleep, so I could dream, study, live. People often said, "You're so lucky to have him." And I believed them with every ounce of my heart. By the time I turned 18, I thought I had life figured out. I was going to study psychology. I had a part-time job. And I had Arav, my constant, my shield. He still dropped me off at class. Still waited outside when I went to events. Still stayed up when I was out late. And when I asked him why he did all this, even when I was old enough to manage on my own, he would just smile and say, "Because I promised Mom I'd never let anything touch you, not even sadness." I used to feel guilty for how much he gave up for me. But he always made it feel like I was worth it. He used to tell me, "One day when you're happy, really truly happy, it'll be my greatest reward." And for years, I thought I was his reason to live. But oh, how little I knew. Because while he guarded my outside world like a warrior, he was hiding something so dark, so unforgivable, it would shatter everything I ever believed about him. And the day I uncovered it was the day my heart stopped calling him Baya and started plotting his end. But before that storm, there was calm. A deceptive, beautiful calm. And in that calm, I saw him as my savior. Even as the lies crawled underneath our roof, waiting to rise. People say the truth has a smell. I never believed that until I started sensing something rotten behind Eros' perfect smile. It started small. He became distant, but not in a way most would notice. To anyone else, he was the same doting brother. Always picking me up, always texting to check on me, always reminding me to eat. But I saw it. In the way his eyes flickered when I asked about his work. In the way he avoided certain topics. In the way he always seemed to end calls the second I entered the room. Still, I silenced the voice in my head. Because how could I doubt him? He'd raised me. He'd sacrificed everything. He was my safe place. But the cracks kept widening. One night, I walked into his room to borrow his laptop for an assignment. He wasn't home. And that's when I saw it. A folder on the desktop. Labeled "Private, Do Not Open." The label was almost laughable. Because it was as if the universe had wrapped temptation in bold letters just for me. I hovered the mouse over it, paused, then backed away. But something in me, something raw, something trembling, whispered, "Open it." And I did. Inside were scanned documents. Photos. Recordings. But one word kept showing up again and again. Guardianship. Property transfer. Anaya Deshmukh psych evaluation. My name. Over and over. One file stopped me cold. Case report and mental instability. Recommendation for controlled guardianship. What? I clicked it. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely scroll. The report said I had a history of emotional instability, difficulty distinguishing reality, and poor decision-making capacity. It was signed by a psychiatrist I had never even met. And then, worse, another paper stating that my legal decisions could be overridden by my guardian. That my inheritance, assets, education fund, everything, had been redirected under Arav's authority. My throat went dry. Was this a joke? A mistake? A terrible misunderstanding? But the files were dated 2 years ago. 2 years. He'd been doing this behind my back, while tucking me in, while saying he loved me, while calling me his whole world. I felt like I was drowning in a truth I never asked for. And that's when the second folder caught my eye. Surveillance. Click. Video files. All time stamped. Most labeled by location. My college. My workplace. Even the coffee shop I visited with my friend Ria every Friday. He had been tracking me. Watching me. Not to protect me, but to control me. The brother I worshiped, the man I called my hero, was turning me into a puppet in a play I never agreed to perform in. I closed the laptop, chest heaving, tears streaming, rage bubbling in my bones. I waited in the dark for him to return. And when he walked in, smiling as always, asking how my day was, I looked him in the eyes, and I didn't see a brother anymore. I saw a liar wearing my family's face. And from that moment, I knew he didn't deserve the love I'd given him. He deserved the silence of the storm that was coming, the one I was going to become. I didn't confront him right away. I couldn't, because the hurt was too big, too raw. And more than that, I wanted to understand why. Why would the brother who raised me with so much love file reports calling me unstable? Why would he steal control over my life while pretending to protect it? So I played along. For the next few days, I smiled when he smiled, laughed at his jokes, ate the food he made. But every second I spent under his roof, I was peeling layers off the mask he wore. I watched him more closely now. I noticed how he checked my phone when I left it on the table, how he had a second phone he never let out of his sight, how every call he took in the balcony ended with, "She has no idea." She? Who was she? That's when I decided to dig deeper. I copied the contents of that folder onto a flash drive and gave it to Ria, my one friend who never questioned me, who never doubted my sanity. When she saw the documents, she looked at me like she didn't recognize me. "Anna, this is insane. This is like psychological imprisonment." She helped me trace the psychiatrist's name, Dr. Kuldeep Rathore, a man who hadn't practiced officially in over 5 years. He'd lost his license. Then came the shock. Ria found bank transactions between Arav and Dr. Rathore. Payments. Regular ones. He'd paid him. Paid him to write fake reports. The brother who sat beside me when I cried had been buying my diagnosis. Why? Why would he do that to me? I dug deeper. And then, I found her. Her name was Meera Sharma, a 29-year-old lawyer. Beautiful. Sharp. Powerful. She had been Arav's girlfriend for over a year. But that wasn't the problem. The problem was that she was after my inheritance. I overheard them one night. I stayed hidden behind the hallway wall, barely breathing, listening through the crack in the door. "Arav, it's all going to be ours, just like we planned." "She doesn't know a thing." "Meera, you sure she won't challenge it?" "She's smart, Arav. Too smart." Arav laughing. "She trusts me like a god. She won't even know what hit her." That laughter. That cold, calculated laughter. It tore through my soul like a knife dipped in betrayal. He was never protecting me. He was protecting his plan. All those years of love, of sacrifices, of shielding me from the world. It was all a setup. To keep me from realizing that the real danger was him. The betrayal was no longer just personal. It was surgical. Strategic. He'd used my trauma, my past, my pain, as tools. And now, I wasn't broken. I was awake. And I knew exactly what I had to do. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't cry. I would make him feel what it meant to lose everything he ever thought was his. And I'd start by tearing apart the one thing he never expected me to touch. His secrets. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? I sat on the floor of my room, surrounded by broken trust, shattered illusions, and one burning thought. If he made me the puppet, I'll become the puppeteer. I stopped being his little sister that night. I became his shadow, watching, learning, planning. I started by getting back into places he locked me out of. I remembered the password to his main email. It used to be my birthday, before he changed it. But Arov was arrogant. He changed it to something smug. Guardian 2020. How poetic. Inside, I found everything. Emails with his lawyer girlfriend Mira, contracts they were drafting, property papers, even the updated will that named himself as the sole executor of my inheritance. And then, the most chilling part, a power of attorney form, signed with my forged signature, granting him full control of all my medical, financial, and legal decisions. That was it. He hadn't just lied to me. He'd erased me. But what he didn't know was that I had already started writing myself back into the story. I sent copies of every file to a cloud server only I could access. Then, I sent them anonymously to Ria and one more person, Karen, a family friend who had always worked in the legal system and adored me like a little sister. He called me within an hour. Anaya, this is criminal. This isn't just fraud, it's coercive control. He can be arrested for this. Are you safe? I told him I was. But inside, I wasn't just safe. I was dangerous. Over the next week, I pretended to fall back into Arov's arms. Told him how grateful I was. How blessed I felt to have him. How I couldn't live without him. And he bought it. He loved it. He started relaxing again. Letting down his guard. Planning dinners with Mira. Making calls I overheard with a smile. But the thing about monsters is, they always forget who taught them to hide under beds. I began recording every conversation. Even the ones where he admitted to having my calls tapped. The ones where he said he owned everything under my name now. The ones where he said I wasn't mentally stable enough to notice the difference. I compiled it all. Video, audio, emails, contracts. A trail of deception so thick, not even his love-sweet words could hide it. And then I made one final visit. To Dr. Rathor. I confronted him. Told him I had evidence of the payments, the fake reports, the illegal signature. I told him I would ruin whatever reputation he had left unless he signed a statement confessing to what he'd done. He folded like a house of cards. Signed every page. And I walked out of that dingy office not as a victim, but as the storm he had unknowingly created. Arov had built his kingdom on lies. But now, I held the fire. And I was about to burn it down. The night came cloaked in silence. But inside me, a storm louder than thunder. I wore my calm like a second skin, the way he once wore lies so perfectly. He was in the kitchen, humming some tune, sipping wine, while I sat at the dining table, playing the little sister he thought I still was. You okay, Anna? He looked up with fake concern, pretending like he hadn't gutted me emotionally just weeks ago. I smiled. A soft, sad smile. More than okay. I just wanted to thank you, bye. For everything. His eyes lit up. He had no idea I had sent every single document, recording, and confession to 4 different law firms earlier that evening. One to Ria. One to Karen. One to a women's rights group. And one directly to Mira's boss, who, incidentally, hated scandals more than lawsuits. You've always been my hero, I whispered. And he laughed. He actually laughed. I stood up slowly, walked to him, placed my hand on his shoulder, and whispered into his ear. You'll remember this night for the rest of your life. His smile faltered. What did you just say? I stepped back, reached into my bag, and tossed a thick envelope onto the counter. That's a copy of your sins. Every one of them. Signed. Recorded. Dated. Delivered. His face turned pale. You're bluffing. Am I? I tapped my phone. On cue, a news alert popped up on the screen behind us. Breaking. Allegations of fraud and medical coercion surface against heir of Mishra family estate. Araf staggered back like someone had punched him. What did you do? He hissed. I did what you never expected me to do. I stood up. You don't know what you've done. This will ruin me. I tilted my head. You ruined me, Araf, and I rebuilt myself with your lies. He lunged at me, panicked, furious, but the doorbell rang before he reached me. He froze. 3 sharp knocks. Then Karen's voice from outside. Arav Mishra? Open the door. We have a warrant. I looked him dead in the eyes. The world saw a protective brother. I saw my universe. But tonight, the universe collapses. And I made sure it collapses loudly. He was arrested that night. Screaming, flailing, still trying to twist the narrative. But the evidence? It screamed louder. The betrayal? It bled on every page. And me? I stood there, watching the brother who once held my hand, being dragged out in handcuffs. That night, I didn't cry. Because tears were for the broken. And I was no longer broken. The media pounced like wolves the moment the news broke. Every headline screamed the name, Arav Mishra, the perfect son, the charming businessman, the protective brother. But now, mastermind of medical fraud. Inheritance scandal exposes family secrets. Beloved brother or betrayer? Truth behind the Mishra legacy. I watched it all from a quiet corner of Ria's apartment, wrapped in a shawl she'd handed me when I couldn't stop shaking. She held me close as the truth lit fire across every screen. Mira, his girlfriend, his co-conspirator, had been suspended from her firm within 24 hours. Her father publicly disowned her on national TV. Dr. Rather's license was revoked. Araf's accounts were frozen. And my story? My story became a reckoning. Karen had arranged a powerful press conference, flanked by women's rights advocates, whistleblower lawyers, and trauma psychologists. And when I stepped onto that stage, into that blinding light of truth, I saw the faces of those who once doubted me, and those who never saw me at all. To the world, I said slowly, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. He was my protective brother. To me, he was everything, until I realized I was nothing to him but a pawn. I didn't cry. I told the world how he forged my medical files, how he manipulated doctors, how he trapped me in a cage built of care and coded in control. People gasped, but I didn't flinch. He used my trauma as currency, I said, eyes burning. He called it love. I now call it violence with a smile. The crowd was silent. Even the reporters struggled to hold their pens. One woman stood up and asked softly, if you could say one last thing to him, what would it be? I took a breath, looked right at the camera. I was the sister you said you'd die for. But you chose to kill me slowly instead. So now, I've chosen to live loudly, fully, and far away from the ashes of who I was when I loved you. They say survivors shine quietly. But that day, I burned. And the fire didn't consume me. It cleansed me. After the press conference, I thought I'd feel free. But freedom doesn't come like a gust of wind. It seeps in slowly, like light under a door cracked open after years in darkness. That day, I walked into the Mishra family law office. Alone. The receptionist flinched when she saw me, almost like I was a ghost that had walked out of the whispers. I need to see the will, I said, calm but unshakable. The real one. She hesitated. But within minutes, Karen entered, smiling with that steady fire he always carried in his eyes. She has full legal authority now, he told them. Arav signed it all away when he tried to fake it. Inside the conference room, I sat where my brother once had. His name used to sit bold and heavy on every folder. Now, mine did. It was surreal, seeing my identity where his lies used to be. They handed me a file. I opened it slowly. Every document I'd fought for. Every piece of paper he forged now exposed, corrected, returned to me. You are now the legal owner of your estate, your medical rights, and all intellectual properties tied to your name, Karen said. My name. Anaya Mishra. For the first time in years, it felt whole. Not a label under my brother's thumb. Not a story told in someone else's words. But mine. I didn't want his money. I didn't want revenge written in rupees or luxury homes. I wanted peace. So I created something out of the ashes, a foundation. For girls like me. Girls whose scars were called sensitive, whose voices were smothered by the people they trusted most. I called it Stormlight because storms destroy, but they also reveal. And I wasn't just the storm anymore. I was the light after it. When Araf tried to reach out from prison, letters full of apologies, manipulations disguised as guilt, I didn't even open them. Because I had learned something. Closure doesn't come from the one who broke you. It comes from looking in the mirror and seeing someone stronger than the pain. I stood on the balcony that night, the city lights flickering below like stars that had come down just for me. And I whispered to the wind, to the world, he was my protective brother. To me, he was my whole universe. Until I realized he'd built that universe just to watch me orbit him. But then, I became the storm that ripped his world to shreds. And in doing so, I built my own sky. They say time heals everything. But some wounds don't ask to be healed, they ask to be honored. And I, Ania Mishra, chose to honor every scar, every silent scream, every second I lived under the shadow of the man the world called my brother. It's strange how people react when truth shatters their perfect image. Some of his friends still whispered, still defended him in hushed corners. He must have had his reasons. He was under pressure. He loved her though, didn't he? No, he didn't love me. He possessed me, controlled me, molded my pain into power he could wear in front of others like a crown. But now, that crown lay shattered beside him in a cold prison cell. I saw a photo of him recently, published in a paper, buried beneath newer scandals. He looked small. No suits. No charm. Just a man stripped of every lie he'd ever lived. And I didn't feel joy. I felt justice. Justice isn't loud. It doesn't always arrive with applause. Sometimes, it arrives in the quiet power of walking away, without hate, without guilt, without needing revenge to finish your sentence. I still wake up some nights gasping, still hear his voice in my dreams, calling me Choti, the way he did when he needed me to trust him. But I remind myself, I'm awake now. And I don't live in his world anymore. I've built my own. A world where girls hold microphones louder than secrets. Where silence isn't sacred, it's broken open loudly and proudly. Where brothers protect, and those who don't lose the right to call themselves one. I walk through my foundation every morning. Stormlight has now helped over 200 girls get legal and mental health support. Some of them hug me like I'm their sister. Maybe I am. Maybe sisterhood isn't about blood after all. Maybe it's about being the safe place you never had. As I stood under the sky on the 1-year anniversary of the day Ara was sentenced, I lit a candle, not for him, but for the girl I used to be. For the little sister who trusted too deeply. And for the woman who finally let the storm inside her rise. And I whispered, to the world, he was my protective brother. To me, he was my whole universe. But when I discovered the truth he hid, my world fell apart. And then, I became the storm that ripped his world to shreds and built a sky he will never touch again.